It's beginning to feel a little bit like college football outside. And it may not be so much a temperature thing as much as like a vibes thing, a smell thing. You kind of get that wind that might not be so much like a cool wind, but just a little bit of a softer wind, a little bit more of a fall wind. I'm telling you, man, college football is right around the corner. This time next week, we will be predicting a college football game with Florida State and Georgia Tech set to get after it in Ireland. But man, before we get to that, we got fall camp to talk about, y'all. We got some intel from across the country. You got Auburn, you got Alabama, you have the Ohio State, which we're going to unpack on today's show in just a matter of moments. But if you're just now finding this show, welcome into the Hard Count. This is the People's College Football Show. We talk college football every single day, live 3 times a week. Would encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss a minute of the college football coverage that we have on this platform. Also, if you're more of a podcast person, that's all good. We got you covered now. So you can subscribe to the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify. No judgment here. Whether you do the Apple Replay or the Spotify Wrap, no judgment here. You just search the Hard Count with JD Pickell, and we'll pop right up for you, man. It is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. I already told you now, some fall camp intel. There were scrimmages that happened this past weekend. Now, even though it was 11-on-11 football, we still have to take it with a grain of salt because sometimes those scrimmages, especially if they're open to the public, will be a little bit more bland, a little bit more vanilla. Sometimes they're not tackle all the way to the ground. They're more of like that thud tempo that you hear about. But even so, man, we got actual 11-on-11 football being played. That's a beautiful thing, so we'll unpack that together. The AP poll came out yesterday. And while I don't have a major issue with the top 25 teams they put together, we had our own reaction to that. I think there would have been some teams that I would have put in different places within that top 25, and Andy Staples talked about that on his show this morning. I think that when we look at that AP poll, pretty much common sense to say that the way that it looks before the season starts and the way it's going to look at the end of the season, typically very different. Who are some teams that were left out of that preseason AP poll? Who wasn't invited to Club AP to start the year, but who at the end of the season will be squarely in that thing? I got 4 teams for you I want us to unpack together. We'll get to that in a matter of moments. Also got to thinking about the college football playoff race, because with 12 teams, man, it feels like that's going to be something we have a better pulse for throughout the duration of the college football season. Very often, it can come down to scheme, come down to strategy, come down to game plan when it comes to you ultimately getting to where you want to go in the college football landscape, especially in this 12-team model. So with that being said, who are the most impactful coaches, most impactful coordinators, rather, to this college football playoff race? I'm not just going to give you a list. I'm going to rank them 5 to 1 in terms of most impactful in this year's playoff race. And then as always as of late on this show, we'll have record predictions for you. We got Texas, we got LSU. Where are they going to finish at this season? And will where they finish be good enough to be in the college football playoff? We've already given you our college football playoff field predictions on a previous show. But even so, if you're new to the channel, again, subscribe. But we'll revisit that together, and we'll talk about both Texas and LSU as it pertains to the college football playoff. But man, it's an exciting time. It is a very, very exciting time because this is the part of the year where as fall camp continues to roll and some teams kind of start to wrap up fall camp, like this is the part of the year we can actually start looking to the games being played. Like we can look ahead and see Florida-Miami on the horizon. Like, yo, we're going to talk about that game tomorrow. We're going to talk a lot about these games that are right around the corner with week 0 and week 1. So it's a beautiful thing. We're glad to have y'all here. This is a very important note I want to give y'all here as we get the show rolling. I mentioned fall camp. It's popping. You got scrimmages. You got position battles. Ohio State might be getting set to name a starter here sooner rather than later, which we'll talk about in a second. A lot of y'all now have kind of been on the fence of, well, I got the YouTube platform and I see things on Twitter, but then I click on that link and sometimes it's behind a paywall. Do I really want to pay that amount of money to get in on the action? I'm just telling y'all now. If you're on the fence, I'm talking to you. You use code JD1 for $1. That's it, 100 cents, $1. You find that walking around the street. You can get your first month of a subscription to On3. So if you are a Nebraska fan, Huskers Online, $1, boom, you're set for a month. If you are an LSU fan, Bengal Tiger, $1, boom, set for a month. Letterman Row, I just told you, Ohio State, I think they're about to name a starting quarterback. You want all the intel, want to have a good gauge for that before that even happens? $1 for 1 month. All right, so this is your sign. If you were looking for a sign as to, should I not? I'm telling you right now, $1 for 1 month, get you a subscription to on3.com, and just get dialed in as much as possible because college football season is here. So, speaking of getting dialed in, I mentioned Ohio State, some fall camp intel for you. They scrimmaged over the weekend. All the reports are telling us from LettermanRow.com, the Ohio State On 3 site. Again, JD1, $1 for 1 month. Will Howard is taking command of that offense. Right? And if you're an Ohio State fan, that's something you're encouraged to hear about because during the spring, he just got to campus. He's figuring out Columbus. He's figuring out Chip Kelly's system. And so it's very fair to have an acclimation process during the spring, especially if you just got on campus. But during fall camp, like if we're still talking about acclimating, it's not necessarily the end-all, be-all, but it's not a good sign, right? Like during fall camp, I want us to be locked and loaded, dialed in. That's the trend right now for Will Howard. And if you don't believe me, listen to his teammates. Like teammates, this is one of my many rules when it comes to kind of deciphering what's going on during fall camp is like men lie, women lie. Your teammates aren't going to lie. Like if you're making strides during practice, they will be very vocal about that. You have had multiple teammates of Will Howard's, guys that practice with him and against him every single day in Columbus, saying, yeah, he's taking massive jumps. Yeah, he looks great. So Ryan Day is speaking to the media on Thursday. This would align right about with the historical timeline Ryan Day has named a starter during fall camp, like mid-August. So keep an eye on that presser. Go ahead and get a membership to LettermanRow.com because they will let you know what's going on. I could just go down the list here. Andy Backstrom, Tim May, Spencer Holbrook, the whole team over there crushing all the content, all the coverage, so get a membership over there. Seth McLaughlin, transfer center from Alabama to Ohio State. Now, Ohio State fans and college football fans in general know him because of that final play in the Rose Bowl and the way that the snap wasn't on the money. I'm just going to tell you what I've heard. Seth McLaughlin, since getting to Columbus, has had 2 bad snaps. I mean, you do the math on how many snaps he's probably had since he's gotten to Columbus. It's a pretty encouraging percentage. The feeling at Ohio State is it may not have been exclusively a Seth McLaughlin problem when it comes to those snaps that were a little bit errant last year at Alabama. That's all I'll say on that. But they feel good about the offensive line, Seth McLaughlin obviously being a part of that. Notice how the tune has changed now with how we talk about those big boys up front for Ohio State. Coming out of the spring, you're like, hey, is the offensive line going to be the governor on what they can do offensively? Because you got all the skill players. You got Will Howard. You got Chip Kelly. Like, do they have what they need up front? Time will tell, but the feeling right now during fall camp is yes. Not a half-hearted yes, not a we'll wait and see, because everything about college football is wait and see during this part of the year. But the vibe is, yeah, they're going to be good. All right, so those big boys up front, they like how they're going to operate running the football. And that's the big part of this whole thing for the Ohio State offense. Like Chip Kelly, man, known for a lot of things offensively, going up tempo, being creative. The overwhelming sentiment out of Letterman Row, again, Ohio State's On 3 site, is that this run game is going to be nasty. Like, this run game will be nasty work, as they say. Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, that's the obvious part of it. Like, you got some horses that can freaking pound the rock for you. But the diversity of the run scheme is something they're very, very excited about in Columbus. They believe this is a running game that not just with the talent level, but just the scheme overall will be able to keep defenses on their toes. Tell you what, man, when you can run the ball, like that just makes everything easier. Like that just makes everything for your offensive line, for your quarterback, heck, for your defense, for the head coach, for the control of the game. Like that is the price of admission. So they feel really good about where that stands, and the offense overall with Will Howard making those strides. Sign to be encouraged if you're an Ohio State fan. Now, defensively, there's a lot of really exciting notes to go over here. I'll start with Sonny Styles because he's kind of been the guy that I've circled for this whole report. Like, he's a guy that played nickel and safety previously for Ohio State. I believe he's actually still listed on the roster on Ohio State's website as a safety. Y'all, he's 6'4", 240 pounds. Not a whole lot of 6'4", 240-pound dudes that can run and be agile enough to play safety. They have since moved him to linebacker. He's blowing it up right now. A guy with his instincts, which to have the instincts to play safety should tell you a lot about his football acumen, then having the build and the physique and the physicality to then make a tackle at the safety position to go up and fill in the run support. He's going to, I think, blow up, as does the people at Letterman Row this upcoming fall. Sonny Styles, a guy to know, a guy to watch. among the other many known commodities within that Ohio State defense. There may not be a more known commodity as a group in Ohio State's defense than BIA, the secondary for Ohio State. They're stacked. That's the obvious part. Like, Ignoson's a dude, like, getting to see him on the field last year in Columbus when we went out there for the Ohio State game, for the Ohio State-Penn State game, rather. Getting to see him in person, I was like, all right, that's what an NFL corner is supposed to look like. Rangy, cut up, long wingspan. Like, that's a dude now that is going to, I think, have a great year this year. Denzel Burke, his resume speaks for itself. Jordan Hancock is a guy they're super excited about. Obviously, Caleb Downs. So that's a list of names. But the note here is that this Ohio State secondary now, it's one thing to just, like, be really good and to practice hard and all those things. That's important. But, like, I don't know about y'all. I want my secondary be a little bit cocky. I want my safeties and my corners to be a little bit arrogant. And the buzz out of Ohio State is this is the mouthiest secondary in America. You're saying, JD, is that really a good thing? Do you really want guys that are just chatterboxes in college football in a position where you are consistently put on an island at the corner position, or when you have to run up and make a tackle on a big 220-pound running back, then also play pass coverage as a safety? Yeah, I want your confidence just like delusionally through the roof. I love that. That honestly gets me fired up for Ohio State because we know they have the talent on that end to back it up as well. Now, an interesting note on the overall scrimmage out of Saturday. Things got a little bit chippy. And if you don't know what I mean by that, not necessarily like a full-on brawl breaking out and things getting out of control, because you see that around the NFL at different points when you see those joint practices. But, like, maybe there's a little bit of a skirmish, a little bit of pushing and shoving. And, like, y'all, if you don't have that during your fall camp, I would be concerned. Like, people say, it's a good to fight. Fighting and being chippy are different things. Like, being chippy to me is like, okay, the competitive juices were so high in this competitive environment, they overflowed. And I'd much rather take an overflowing cup of competitive juice than have to try and get that thing up to the brim and push and try and get my team dialed in. Like, that's not the situation at Ohio State right now. So that fires me up. I love that energy from them right now. And, again, we'll talk more about Chip Kelly and Will Howard a little bit later in the show. But so far out of Ohio State, fall camp is operating as I think you would hope a national title contender kind of team would operate. Now, Auburn. They had a scrimmage this past Saturday as well. They had a different tempo. So their scrimmage was a little bit more open, and their scrimmage was what we call a thud tempo. So what does thud mean? Just how it sounds. Thud is essentially you are hitting the ball carrier, you're wrapping up, but we are not taking anybody to the ground as a full tackle, okay? We want to keep everybody healthy. Season's right around the corner. It's a way to get good work, but still keep everybody upright. So with that being the case, it's hard to take as much away from the defensive side of things because you're like, well, hey, he wrapped up, but like, would someone have gotten out of that tackle? Is that really going to be good enough for a tackle in the game? So that's all sort of something where it's like, hey, we'll never actually know. So you take it with a grain of salt. Let's start at the quarterback position. Peyton Thorne, I think, has been one of the most highly scrutinized players in college football, period, this offseason. All reports out of Auburn are like, hey, he looks pretty smooth. Now, the reports behind closed doors are that during practice, like, they're lighting it up. Like he's just been dynamite, pushing the ball downfield, offense looks more explosive, all those things. During this scrimmage, though, the sentiment is like, hey, he just took what the defense gave him. Like, was conservative is always kind of an ugly word talking about quarterbacks, but Peyton Thorne during the scrimmage, it sounds like, was fairly conservative to some degree. Threw 2 touchdowns, did not even come close to turning the ball over, is what I was told. Now, behind him, there's some competition now. You got Holden Gerner, you got Hank Brown. From what I've been told, Hank Brown is spinning it. All right, now, obviously, for any young quarterback, consistency is going to be a thing as he progresses throughout his college career. But, like, I'll just say this. Sounds like Hank Brown had some good moments during that scrimmage. I would not be surprised. Again, I don't know this. This is just my gut feeling. I would not be surprised if he ended up being your QB2 for Auburn this year. I'll leave it at that. Now, Keandre Lambert-Smith didn't play. Cam Coleman sounds like was barely targeted. The young bucks, though, for Auburn in this wide receiver room, outside of Cam Coleman, we've been told a lot about, and they've been a talking point since they've committed to Auburn. Malcolm Simmons had a day and a half, it sounds like. Perry Thompson also had a big day. Like, those are two guys that I think will factor in some respect at some point for Auburn this year. The overwhelming sentiment is like, hey, these young dudes at Auburn, like this young core nucleus of guys they have, they are continuing to push and overtake some of the guys that maybe have been there for a little bit longer. Rivaldo Fairweather, what I was told is, yeah, he's listed as a tight end, but like they're going to use him every which way. You can put him out in the slot, can put his hand in the dirt because he's such a freaking massive human being. There's reason to be excited. I don't know that he got that much burn during the scrimmage necessarily, but overwhelmingly through fall camp, results and what you've heard about him is extremely, extremely positive. Now, again, going back to defense, it's tough to take too much away when you're going thud. Sounds like they were fairly aggressive defensively. I would also mention this during a scrimmage. When you are scripting together a scrimmage as a coaching staff, a lot of times you're doing that to get a certain look against a certain defensive scheme or offensive scheme. It sounded like the offense maybe did some things they wouldn't do during a game week to get a good look against this defense, if you catch my drift. So all that's to say, offense was maybe a little bit more conservative than they would be. Defensively, they were a little bit more aggressive. Sounds like they had a good day. Again, I don't know exactly how much you want to take from that. Jaron Thompson, throughout his time since getting to Auburn, even in the spring, has been a dude. The safety transfer over from Texas. He's spoken extremely highly about his teammates on that defensive side of the football. Has said it's one of the most talented units he's been a part of. So take of that as you will. The big thing for me with Auburn that has been continually a talking point for them throughout the spring, throughout fall camp, and we felt this when we went out there during spring practice. Like, it's year 2 for Hugh Freeze and company out there. It doesn't feel like it. Like, it doesn't feel like a team going into their second year in the system. Like, there was a bit of a reset offensively, which honestly I think has benefited them, and that's kind of the overwhelming feeling internally as well, is that they are better off now with the way they're doing things offensively with Derek Nix and Hugh Freeze. But, like, what I want to make sure we say here is they feel very organized. They feel cohesive. That's massive because it didn't always feel that way last year. So to be able to make strides and to be in the position they're at right now and to have the vibe they have right now out of fall camp, hard to take anything away but a positive right now from what you're hearing on the plains and from the folks over at Auburn Live. So again, Auburn Live, the On3 Auburn site, JD1 at checkout, $1 1 month. If you're on the fence now, that is what you need to do to get yourself as dialed in as possible for college football season. Now, one more team I want to talk about that also had a scrimmage over the weekend, Alabama. And the Kalen DeBoer era is clearly off and running. Everyone's wondering, well, how's Jalen Milroe going to look? How's this offense going to mesh? We've been telling you for a long time now. I think it's going to be magic. Right now, the reports are that they are starting to build the offense to Jalen Milroe. During the spring, you're kind of just installing all the base stuff. You're trying to get everybody the same looks. You're trying to give all the quarterbacks the same systems to run through. Now they're starting to go, okay, well, we're going from the Kalen DeBoer Alabama offense to the Kalen DeBoer Alabama offense with Jalen Milroe at quarterback. Last year, there was a point during that LSU game, it felt like to me at least, where it went from the Alabama offense under Tommy Rees to where it was no longer even the Tommy Rees offense. It was like, hey, we got Jalen Milroe at quarterback. Let's use him. Let's let him cook. Right now, going back to what I was talking about, kind of building that scheme to Jalen Milroe, he's been extremely confident. Had a great scrimmage, it sounds like a long bomb touchdown pass, also broke off a huge run. The overwhelming term when they talk about him is confidence. Confidence. And I'll tell you this, to be a first-year quarterback in a new system, or a first-year system, you heard him saying, Jalen Milroe now is going through his first offseason in Kalen DeBoer's offense. Confidence isn't the word that you need to use during fall camp for a guy like that, in a system like this. Like, it would be very okay if Jalen Milroe was still getting up to speed and figuring out the checks and all those things. To say that he's confident right now in this system, I think speaks volumes to the architect behind the offense for Kalen DeBoer and speaks volumes to Jalen Milroe and the work he's putting in right now to get comfortable in this offense. So he's QB1, there's no doubt about it. But also, as much as you hear like the noise about Jalen Milroe and his success, there's a lot of good things said about Ty Simpson right now. Backup quarterback out there at Alabama. And so you hope and pray that nothing ever happens to Jalen Milroe, as long as there is a chance for him to be on the field like you want him on the field. But at the exact same time, with the understanding that college football gives and college football takes in a very ugly sense, Ty Simpson is a very capable backup, period. Like not just capable backup if something horrible happens, not just capable backup if like Jalen Milroe's helmet pops off for a play. Like if you need to go to Ty Simpson, they feel good about that in Tuscaloosa. All right. Now in the pass catchers department, Jeremy Bernard, transfer wide receiver from Washington, is wide receiver 1 right now. He is the lead dog, and that makes a lot of sense because he was with Kalen DeBoer at Washington. He is just picking up where he left off at. He's just wearing a different uniform and practicing in a different place. Outside of him, Ryan Williams is a dude who reclassified, really should be getting ready for a high school game right now, and he's balling. And there was, I think, some, not concern, but maybe some apprehension from us, at least as the college football public, when he was getting to Alabama in terms of his role this upcoming season. Because obviously a very talented individual, but you're like, hey, man, like you were supposed to play another year of high school football. The headline is he's going to be a factor some way, somehow this year. I believe he had a big scrimmage as well. Caleb Odom, if you're on social media, and if you're watching the show, I'm assuming you are, he had a one-handed snag that went out, I believe it was on the Alabama Twitter account or somehow hit Bama Twitter. And, I mean, it was like full extension, elevation, one hand, but like just, I mean, like video game stuff. And he's 6'5", 227 pounds. When he was going to college, there was a thought of like, well, hey, is he a tight end? Is he a receiver? Y'all, he's been playing receiver. He would have had to transition to tight end. Bama, from what I can tell and from the way that it looks, is going to use him as a receiver. It's a big body at receiver now. Like, you don't think Jalen Milroe might be looking for him when it comes to the red zone? Might be a mismatch, put it up top where the kids can't get it. I'm just saying. They like Caleb Odom, and they like what he's doing so far as well. Tight ends are going to be a part of this pass game. That's been something that the folks at Bama Online have echoed many times. C.J. Dupree and Josh Cuevas both had good scrimmages. It sounds like Josh Cuevas had a touchdown catch. They will be involved in this offense, not just as blockers, but like I just said, as pass catchers. And that is the future now of modern college football, having tight ends that you can split out in the slot, that you can have their hand in the dirt, that you can create matchups for in the middle of the field. They are going to be a factor for Jalen Milroe. If you go back and watch Washington last year and how they utilized Jack Westover, he got a lot of targets. Like if you rode with us during Prize Picks, we loved the Jack Westover more than number any given week. So both those guys will be forces for the Bama offense this year. Up front, they love the trenches. They love the way that this offensive and defensive line are battling back and forth. And that sounds kind of cliche, but I'm telling you, like in the SEC, to have good on good, iron sharpens iron kind of looks during fall camp, that matters. That's a way to get meaningful reps before you even play your first game. They love the interior of this offensive line, which when we talk about the trenches, like that is as trenchy as it gets, man. Like guard, center, guard, that is, from my understanding and from what I can gauge, like is what's going to put the pocket together for Jalen Milroe. That's going to be inside zone. That's going to be 4th and 1, getting that first down when it comes to a quarterback sneak or an inside run. Like that is the key ingredients now. So I wouldn't just brush past that if I'm an Alabama fan. Defensively, LT Overton playing that bandit role for them, he has been a dude for them so far during fall camp. It sounds like he had a great scrimmage. The bandit's kind of like an edge rusher / defensive lineman. Like you can drop him, you can have him rush the passer. I would just say this when you talk about LT Overton. Highly recruited guy out of high school, was at A&M last season, comes to Bama. Think about those great Bama teams, those Bama teams that end up competing for something, whether they win the SEC, they make the college football playoff. Like they usually have a dude up front that wreaks havoc. That is like the guy on the defensive line. LT Overton, through fall camp, a few practices and a scrimmage, could be that guy. So keep an eye on him. But intel galore, again, Bama Online, JD1, $1 for your first month. Like you want to get all the coverage from guys like Tim Watts, Charlie Potter, like the whole team over there is crushing it. JD1, $1 for your first month. Go ahead and lock that in, all right? Appreciate y'all in advance for that. So the AP poll came out yesterday. And the AP poll, man, like God bless them. I have no issues with anyone who votes on the AP poll. I have no issues with, quite frankly, the AP poll they put together. We're going to do a segment on this in the future. Like, there's a couple of things that are just kind of meaningless around college football. College football itself is not meaningless, but like putting together a preseason poll before they even play a game, I'm here for it. We're going to do our own preseason poll, but like If you're bent out of shape about the preseason poll, I don't know what to tell you, because it's going to change a lot from what they just put out to once they actually give out the last preseason, or the last AP poll rather. With that being said, who's going to finish in the AP poll that maybe wasn't in the preseason poll? Like, who's going to go from unranked to ranked? And from what I can gauge now, that threshold of what you need to achieve to be in the AP poll at the end of the year is right around 8-4. So we're going to call our shot here and tell you who I believe wasn't ranked yesterday but will be ranked at the end of the season. And we talked about Auburn already, man, but I think Auburn's going to be there. I really do. Like, I think it's all coming together very quickly. I think their roster is too good, and the progress they've made under a year or two Hugh Freeze system, like organizationally, operationally, culturally, all those things, I think, is going to get them over the hump in some situations last year where, like, they just didn't look like maybe they were playing to their potential. And last year, even with not playing to their potential, they had several games where you look at and you say, okay, like just how you talk about a dog, or a puppy rather, having big paws, it's going to grow into something special. Like, that was Auburn last year. They had big paws. A lot of big pause moments. The Georgia game, the Alabama game, we've beat to death on this show. But you look at the games where, like, they looked just like they were close but no cigar kind of situation, took their eye off the ball situation. I don't think you'll see that in year two under Hugh Freeze. Like, I don't think you'll see a special teams blunder at the end of the game against Alabama or in whatever situation they find themselves in. I don't think you'll see them just sleepwalk and, for whatever reason, be out-schemed against a New Mexico State. It's not going to happen. So for those reasons, and for all the talent they have and the progress I think you'll see from Peyton Thorne in 2024, I think Auburn will be ranked in the final AP poll. The big swing games for them are Oklahoma, obviously, at Missouri, at Kentucky. If you can go 2-1 in that stretch, I think you'll be ranked. And then obviously if you win your bowl game, that helps a whole heck of a lot, but I think that's good enough for Auburn to be ranked in that final AP poll. Now, Nebraska is a team that we are very high on. We make no apologies for that. We're trusting the trend of what Matt Rule has done pretty much everywhere he's been in the collegiate ranks, from Temple to Baylor and out in Nebraska. Those close losses from previous seasons, it's not going to translate. And if you're a Nebraska fan, you're like, don't tell me that. Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. I don't want to hear it. I come in peace. I'm just telling you now. This team will be a Matt Rule team in year two. I fully believe that. Last year, they were a team coached by Matt Rule. I do not believe that was a team that had Matt Rule DNA a part of the roster. And what I mean by that is details, process-oriented, all those things. There's a social clip floating around on Twitter right now that got me fired up, and it's Matt Rule talking to his guys during the scrimmage, and stops it mid-scrimmage with people, out in the stadium, and it's like kind of this big event. And he stops the practice, brings everybody in, and he says, "We are not playing winning football right now." I'm paraphrasing. That's what he said. He's like, we have a crowd in front of us, and we want to act a certain way. Like, we are not playing to our standard right now. He's like, let's lock the heck in. This is why we lose, when we do things like this. And so to have that awareness and to be able to communicate that to his team in real time, a lot of coaches would have waited till the end of the practice. A lot of coaches would have just ripped them in film or in the team room. Like, Matt Rule, I believe wholeheartedly, has set that temperature to where it needs to be. And I think they have a roster good enough to achieve that 8-4 mark. The defense is obvious, right? The defense is going to be really good. Wholeheartedly believe that. Bring back 70+% production from one of the best units in America last year. Offensively, we talk about Dylan Raiola. Look at this receiver group. Jamal Banks, transferred from Wake Forest, led Wake Forest in receiving last year. He's now on the roster. Isaiah Nayor tore up Wyoming before going to Texas. Didn't work out at Texas. Still a really talented receiver. Jalen Lloyd is also a super talented receiver they have. He blew up during the spring game. Super explosive. I'd watch him. I'm just saying now, they got more firepower than I think they've had previously in that pass catcher room. Keep an eye on that. So Nebraska, I think, will be ranked at the end of the college football season. Now, Wisconsin, man, and y'all that have watched this show, you know that I'm high on Wisconsin. I am. Was high on Wisconsin last year. Got burned. That's okay, man, because as Michael Scott would say, there's no doubt about it, I'm ready to get hurt again. And that's how I feel this year. Death, taxes, Luke Fickell coaching winning football. Luke Fickell has won less than 8 games during his college coaching career as a head coach. 3 different seasons. All 3 of those seasons, it was his first year on the job. Coincidence? I think not. All right, so no Ohio State, no Michigan on the schedule. They get Oregon at home. Defense brings back 70% production. That running back room still has studs in it. If they can just kind of clean up the year 1 errors they had last season and be able to stay healthy at quarterback, whoever it ends up being, that can run Phil Longo's system, full transparency, I think it'll be Tyler Van Dyke. They're going to have a chance. So I'm not telling you Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten, but I do think Wisconsin's going to be one of those teams that we sit there at the end of the season, check out the final AP poll. We say, oh, yeah, look at that big red W in there. That'll be Wisconsin. Last team for you, Virginia Tech. Continuity, momentum, plus a dude at quarterback. Usually things work out okay for those teams, Like usually that's a winning formula of sorts. They are number 1 in America in returning production. They won 5 of their last 7 in 2023. That's momentum. That also equates to belief. Like guys that were on last year's roster finished the way they did. They're like, okay, so that's how it's done. Oh, so that's how you do it. Okay, good to know. We can do that. You got a guy at quarterback, man, that's 6'2", 235 pounds, and Kyron Drones. Absolute wagon of a human being. Good luck tackling him. He also finished the season really strong. We've talked about their schedule a lot. Like they're at Miami, but it's on a Friday. Weird things happen on a Friday. I'm just going to leave it at that. Clemson, they come to you in November. No Florida State, no NC State. I got them at 9-3. That will be more than good enough to be ranked. Now, Brent Pry has said multiple times they have their sights set on winning the ACC. Like that is their standard. That is their goal, more or less, is going to the ACC title game. He said that. Kyron Jones has said that. It's very clear. They are raising the standard internally in Blacksburg. And to go somewhere, you first have to set your sights on it. And even if they don't make the ACC title game, to have that as where they are competitively aspiring to be, not that every team doesn't aspire to win the conference title game, but it's one thing to say it out loud. It's another thing to say it out loud and have some real validity and meaning behind it. I think that's VaTech. So I think they're ranked at the end of the year. I think Auburn's ranked at the end of the year. I think Nebraska's ranked at the end of the year, and I think Wisconsin's ranked at the end of the season. So let me know who we missed, who you think should be in the AP poll at the end of the season. Full transparency, I don't have a major issue with any of these teams being left out. I think you could make a case for Nebraska and VaTech being in the top 25 preseason. I get why they're not. But at the end of the year, man, all 4 of those teams, I believe, will be in that final top 25. You got to love it, man. The AP poll, I don't mean to hate on the AP poll, even though I kind of am a little bit. The AP poll means college football's close, right? Like that should get you fired up. So this week, we've done this the last few Tuesdays, and y'all seem to enjoy it, so we'll keep a good thing going. What gets us juiced, and if you're just now finding this show, this segment's just a little blurb throughout the show where we tell you what we're fired up about. We think college football is the greatest sport on the face of the planet. Nay, we know it is. We think that college football is a celebration of everything that is good, right, and true with just the collegiate model in sports in general. So what got me juiced looking at kind of what happened over the past week and over the weekend, man. Like I'm scrolling through the Twitter sphere, I'm checking the Instagram, and I couldn't help but just like look down at my phone, and then I'd noticed that I like had this kind of weird smile on my face. And the reason why is because I was seeing tackle football on my timeline. And yes, it was guys in practice jerseys. Yes, it was just the highlight reel from whatever school's social account putting it out. And yes, it was fall propaganda. But you know what? Gosh dang it, I love that. Gosh dang it, that means that we are so freaking close to week 0 and week 1 in the college football season being upon us. And we'll talk about this more on a future show, but like fall propaganda that you get from your school social media account, like you should inhale that. You should drink that in. That should be what sustains you from fall camp into the week of the season, all right? Because that is real football being played. That is something that is happening in real time. That is not something that is being doctored contrary to popular trends that went on in the social media world, I don't know, I guess a week or so ago with the whole darts only thing. That's real. That's something tangible. Grab onto that. College football is back. Enjoy that. So that got me fired up, man, seeing college football being played and actually on the timeline, dude. A beautiful thing. We love to see it. So that's what got us juiced. But let us know in the social, on the social media platforms, at JD Pickell, Twitter and Instagram, and also in the comments section. What's got you juiced right now, man? What's got you juiced? Someone in the live chat says, JD, just grow a mullet. I would, but I enjoy being a married man, and my wife would probably leave me. All right, so got to thinking as well about the college football playoff race over the last couple of days. And we gave our playoff picks already, but I got to thinking, like, yes, the players are ultimately what decides what happens on the field. But how many games can we look back on and say, you know what, man? They were just out-schemed. Man, that coordinator just had them dead to rights, and that's why they won the football game. So I got to thinking, man, who are the most impactful coordinators to the 2024 college football playoff race? I'm not just going to throw a list at you. We're going to rank them. All right, 5 to 1. We're going to rank our top 5 most impactful coordinators to the college football playoff race. Want to start with an honorable mention. Danton Lynn from USC was a defensive coordinator. I'm just not convinced that defensive personnel is as bad as we saw last year. And if you've watched this show, you've heard me say many times, like, I don't even know what to make of the USC defense because they weren't even aligned properly half the time. Like, they weren't even fitting inside zone correctly. Like, we're not even able to be in the right phase in man coverage. And so I think USC, the caliber of player they've recruited, it may not be, like, up there with the Georgias of the world, but I don't think that it's necessarily quite as far behind as it looked last season. And so I'm very curious to see how much of a change do you get when Danton Lynn adds into the fold calling that defense with Alex Grinch now out of the picture? Remains to be seen. The reason why I don't have him higher on this list, why he's an honorable mention, I'm curious about Miller Moss in the offense. Not doubting, just looking for more answers. Now, if they beat LSU week 1, that would probably bolster some confidence, but I'm curious to see what he ends up being. We're doing our very best here to not fall victim to bowl syndrome, which bowl syndrome is just our verbiage for trying not to read too much into a bowl game and make some overarching opinion on the upcoming season off of 4 quarters of play. So we'll leave it at that. At number 5, I got Pete Golding, the Ole Miss defensive coordinator. Now, for me, the impact for him will determine how deep of a college football playoff run Ole Miss makes, because I think based on the personnel, both offensively and defensively, they are going to make the college football playoff. I've said that. Heck, I believe they're going to play for the SEC championship in Atlanta. I believe that. Nobody questions the firepower offensively, but now with the transfer talent you have on defense and the guys that you have returning on defense, from a Ivy to a Centering Perkins, like, can you get those guys on the same page and gel defensively with your transfer players, from a Walter Nolan or Princely Umanmiel, and guys you've heard me talk about probably more than anybody else during this college football offseason? Can you get them to gel, be on the same page? That's one. But second, and arguably as importantly, can you win those chess games? And what I mean by that is, like, when you play LSU and Joe Sloan, can you have a game plan in place to be a step ahead? Because I think in that situation, like, we're going to find out personnel-wise where they stack up with those teams in the SEC. But I have to feel like right now there will be a gap that's not quite as wide as it used to be. Can you put together a game plan to elevate your team in those situations, especially on the road in Death Valley? Also Georgia, Mike Bobo and co. Again, personnel, you may not be just top of the SEC, but you're good enough now. You're in the conversation, in the arena, to where I think coaching can make the difference. And then obviously the college football playoff, whoever you end up drawing in that deal, you're going to have the game plan to elevate your defense. So Pete Golding, I think, is one of the most impactful coordinators in the college football playoff race. We got him at number 5 on our list. At number 4, staying on the defensive side of the ball. Spoiler alert, we got 3 DCs on this list of the 5. And as an offensive guy, it hurts my heart a little bit. Nonetheless, we press forward. Blake Baker from LSU. I truly believe that the LSU offense, even with losing Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, I truly believe that they will still be a college football playoff caliber offense. We're going to do our record prediction for them a little bit later in the show. But can the defense hold up their end of the deal? Because the unfortunate reality is last year, and LSU fans know this, like, they had a national championship caliber offense and had a third-page defense when it comes to total defense. When you're scrolling through the college football stats on the NCAA.com or collegefootballstats.com, whatever it is, you don't find LSU in total defense until you get to that third page. That's unheard of in Baton Rouge. So for Blake Baker, what he did at Missouri, which where he was last year, if you're coming up to speed here, LSU cleaned house defensively. Sad but true. Blake Baker, now the new DC out there. he may not have the personnel that he needs, just so we're all on the same, like hand up, he may not have all the ingredients to make the meal that you expect in Baton Rouge. But here's the deal, man. Good coordinators, heck, great coordinators, great coaches that get themselves some jewelry, they do more with less. The end. Like that is what Blake Baker is going to be asked to do, I believe, at LSU. Now, the massive wild card is how he utilizes Harold Perkins. Something LSU fans have been clamoring for a while here. Something LSU fans have been, really eyeing since Harold Perkins' freshman year. Spoiler alert, I think he'll use him how you would like him to be used if you're an LSU fan. Now, that may not show itself in week 1. It may not show itself in week 4. By the end of the season, though, I think Harold Perkins will be back to a version of what he was as a true freshman at LSU. The reason why I feel that way is because what Harold Perkins does well and how Blake Baker likes to coach football, man, I mean, they are just like hand in glove. Like, it is a perfect fit. They want to get after the freaking quarterback. Blake Baker had one of the highest sack rates in America last year at Missouri. I think Harold Perkins probably enjoyed watching Missouri's defense last year when he got to kind of get familiar with this new defense in Baton Rouge. They will be aggressive. So if you can be good enough at LSU, they will make the college football playoff. Again, good enough defensively. That is my take on things. Blake Baker obviously will have a massive hand in that as the new DC out there. Now, speaking of LSU, new DC, also a new OC, but the OC last year at LSU is now at Notre Dame. That is none other than Mike Denbrock, coming in at number 3 on our list of most impactful coordinators to the college football playoff race. It is all about how much Mike Denbrock can equip Riley Leonard to be the best version of himself. Sounds kind of cliche, right? Hey, be the best version of yourself today. It is what it is, but cliches oftentimes, cliche because they're true. Okay, so Mike Denbrock last year, we saw what he did going from year 1 to year 2 with Jaden Daniels. The thing with his offense that jumps out to me when you watch them, it's going to probably look a little bit different because you don't have 2 first-round wide receivers, at least that we know of, out wide for you at Notre Dame. We'll see how high Riley Leonard gets drafted after this season. But the thing with them is they like to swing big and connect big. Like they had 10.8 yards a pass last year at LSU. That's good for number 1 in all of college football. Now, they also want to pound the freaking rock, okay? So they want to run the football, also take shots deep, kind of put that third level of your defense really in a bind. I'm not so much concerned about that because I think they'll attempt to do it. The question is, can Riley Leonard be consistent enough downfield? That's my big question mark there. But even more so, like, my question is, well, what happens when that's not there? Because my gut with Notre Dame is there's going to be a game, whether it's against a USC, it might be that first game against A&M, I don't know. But there's going to be a game where Notre Dame does not have plan A. That's not saying much. Pretty much everyone in college football has a game like that during their 12-game stretch. My question is, well, what's plan B? Because as good as Jaden Daniels was last season, the year before is when LSU beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, right? Like, Jaden Daniels hadn't even become Jaden Daniels just yet. And so I think the thing that I'm watching for them is like, okay, that pseudo triple option that Mike Denbrock ran a lot with Jaden Daniels, is that the go-to? Is it the run game? Is it putting the ball on the perimeter with all the speed they have via the portal at the wide receiver room? Like, we'll see. What's plan B? If you can have a really solid plan B, Notre Dame's going to be not just a playoff team, they'll be a force in the playoff. Because that means that Riley Leonard is comfortable, means the offense is multiple, and it means that the vibes are very high in South Bend. So Mike Denbrock, I believe, is one of the most impactful coordinators in college football, and I don't think it's really even a discussion. Now, at number 2, again, another DC, man. Breaks my heart, but we got to talk about it. Kane Womack, Alabama's DC. It's pretty simple for him. Like, I think they feel pretty good about what they have in that front 7. I think they feel pretty good overall about the talent they have on defense. The thing is, just a lot of guys haven't played a lot of college football. There's no shame in that, especially when it's guys on Alabama's roster that were all, if they committed out of high school, part of a top 2 recruiting class. The big thing I'm watching, man, is the secondary. Like, can you equip those guys to be comfortable and just play instinctual football? And that's the overwhelming report right now out of Tuscaloosa is, like, on the back end, this secondary, What they're trying to do schematically is much less complex. And while to some regard you're like, okay, well, is that more difficult to disguise coverages? Will that hurt us being too simplistic? I don't know, but I will say this. Football is a simple game made complicated by stupid people. I don't think Kane Womack is a stupid person. I think he's going to let his guys play free, and they're going to have to play against some pretty good passing offenses. Like, say what you want about Wisconsin in week 3. When you go to them, they're going to try to push the ball downfield. That's what Phil Longo does. Georgia and Carson Beck, pretty good quarterback. Tennessee, we saw when Saban was there what they were capable of. Missouri, they got the best receiver in all of college football, Luther Burden. LSU, like we go down the list here. If the secondary can put it together and not be the governor to Alabama as a whole, they're going to go on a run in the college football playoff. And they might do more than that when it comes to their overall postseason accolades, and who knows what they do when Georgia comes to town. You hear what I'm saying? Can the secondary put it together? That's my question. Kane Womack and his philosophy defensively, from what I can tell, I'm excited to see that. Because I think the talent they have isn't the question. It's, can they put it together? Can you get them comfortable if you're Kane Womack? And the most important coordinator in all of college football to this year's college football playoff race is Chip Kelly in Ohio State. You know why Chip Kelly was brought to Ohio State? He's a good coordinator. You know, his offensive football, relationship with Ryan Day. Yeah, that's all true. All those things are true. Chip Kelly was brought to Ohio State to make the difference. Because we know what they are defensively. We do. Like, we can try and break it down as much as we want to, and we can look at all the preview magazines and look at the stats. Like, we know what they are defensively. They're going to be one of the best, if not the best, in all of college football. They got everybody back. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. I told you I love Sonny Styles. I love their secondary. They got Caleb Downs just because they freaking felt like it. Like, Ohio State, defensively, right now on paper, has a national championship defense. That wasn't always the case. Offensively, you got a lot of ingredients. I think you have the best backfield in America. I think you have more than elite receivers when it comes to Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. Like, I'm just naming names here because we can do that with Ohio State. Like, that is what they have. That's the luxury they have. You bring in Will Howard. I think he's an upgrade from Kyle McCord. Hope Kyle McCord goes for 6,000 yards at Syracuse. I think Will Howard's an upgrade. At the exact same time, last year, Will Howard went 24-10, touchdown to interception ratio. That's not really what you want. I don't know if that's good enough to get it done, but I think the skill set of Will Howard is what you get excited about if you're an Ohio State fan. I think he is a more than capable passer. I think he's a tremendous athlete. That is a really good runner of the football that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Chip Kelly is going to be tasked with not just elevating Will Howard, but maximizing him and making him in this offense as dynamic as possible to where they reach their goal. And it's a difficult conversation to have anytime we talk about Ohio State and expectations, because like, expectations are as high as they get. Win the national title. That's the expectation. Just so we're on the same page, I think Chip Kelly is a good enough OC to get that done. I think he will equip Will Howard more than good enough to get that done. Will it happen? Remains to be seen. But they're going to run first to set Will Howard up to be successful. I think Chip Kelly, if they win the national championship, you, of course, give your hat tip to Ryan Day because he brought in Chip Kelly, but you make sure you give Chip Kelly a lot of credit because there was a lot said about Will Howard and what he couldn't accomplish. There was a lot said about Ryan Day and what he wouldn't accomplish. Like, you make sure Chip Kelly gets his flowers because he would be effectively accomplishing what he was brought in to do, which is make the difference. So, to recap it for you, most impactful coaches to the college football playoff race at the coordinator level. Honorable mention, Dan Lynn from USC. At number 5, Pete Golding at Ole Miss, the DC. Blake Baker, the LSU DC. Mike Denbrock, Notre Dame's OC. Kane Womack, the Alabama DC. Can you keep it simple and allow that talent to flourish? And then the number 1 most impactful coordinator in all of college football for the playoff race is going to be Ohio State's OC, Chip Kelly. Let me know who you would have in there, though. There was a couple of the names that we probably could have thrown in there. Elected not to, but would be curious to hear y'all's thoughts. Again, this is the playoff race, not just college football, but the playoff race specifically. Now, speaking of the playoff race, Texas, their over-under win total is set to 10.5. That's what Vegas thinks. What do we think when it comes to their record prediction in 2024? We'll break it down right now, but if you're a Texas Longhorn fan, welcome home. Like, we talk college football every single day on this show. Why? One, because they pay us, which is still ridiculous. I mean, we would do it for free. Do not tell them that. Do not tell them that. Make sure you're subscribed right here because it's college football every single day. Talk a lot about Texas. Talk a lot about every single other team in college football. Just make sure you're locked in. We appreciate y'all for that. As I was saying, over-under win total, 10.5 for Texas. The thing you heard a lot last year is, man, Texas is back. Texas is this. Texas is that. And I've held for a long time, even before last season, we were saying back versus not back. Like, that's for the clicks crowd. Like, that's for the thumbnail crowd, and that's all good. We respect that. We appreciate that. However, though, what I would say around Texas, instead of back versus not back, I would say Texas, under Steve Sarkisian, has arrived. And he said it on a podcast going into last year. Steve Sarkisian was like, yeah, this looks like my team. They practice like my team. Physically, they look like my team. This is now a Texas, not just his team. This is a Texas program. Not program. The quarterback play with Quinn Ewers, I think, was indicative of what Steve Sarkisian wants to have. Also, the quarterback depth. Behind Quinn Ewers, you got Arch Manning. First world problems. They have talent at the skill. Not just the guys they had last year, that was obvious, but look at how they've attracted skill. Like, Steve Sarkisian lost 2 NFL wide receivers, 3, I guess you count Jordan Whittington, which I think you should. And then they went out and got Isaiah Bond. Went out and got Silas Bolden. Got Amari Niblack, a tight end from Alabama. Like, they got, like, real deal, high-level ingredients to add into that wide receiver room for the skill players. Line of scrimmage, I believe, resembles what you want it to. If you're Steve Sarkisian up front, I know you lost Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, but I have to believe that I think that cupboard is a little bit more stocked than maybe folks would like to give credit for out there in Austin. They're going to be fine. Up front, offensively, they'll be fine as well. Now, you lose C.J. Baxter. That hurts. I mean, I hate every single part of that for not just C.J. Baxter, but the Texas fan base as well. Like, you just hate that. One of the ugly parts about college football. However, I do think that Steve Sarkisian is skilled enough and is a good enough coach to be able to utilize the guys that are still healthy in that room. Jaden Blue, obviously, will be the guy that they look to, I think, most notably with C.J. Baxter down. Now, here's the other thing. You can talk about the roster. And to be real now, any coach can flip a roster. And I say any coach with good resources can flip a roster, right? It's kind of where we live right now in modern college football. It's a lot harder to flip a roster and then have good culture to go with it. And I think the culture at Texas is something that was always talked about as like the negative and why they would never achieve their goals of winning the conference and all that. But like, I think the culture now at Texas is new Texas. And we saw that multiple times last year. I mean, I pointed to the time when Quinn Ewers went down and how they responded and how they found different ways to win games in different spots. I mean, the letdown after Oklahoma, bounce back, go win some football games. The big win after Alabama, stay level-headed, take care of business the next week. So that's one part of it. But I think even more specifically, we talked to Jahdae Barron at SEC Media Days, and you would sort of expect a little more of a, when talking to someone who just, won the conference and made the college football playoff, maybe a more satisfied tone, maybe a little more of a, yeah, we're happy we did that last year, we're looking forward to next year, we feel good about where we're at. Like, it was a very, dare I say, aggressive tone from Jahdae Barron. Like, they were disappointed in what they didn't accomplish last year. Like, they are a hungry outfit out there in Austin. And I would love that if I'm the head coach at Texas. Like, that would fire me up if I'm a fan at Texas. The Texas culture now is very different than we've seen in years past out there. I'll leave it at that. So when we do these record predictions, y'all know us, man, we go game by game. It's August. We're calling our shot. We make no apologies for it. If we're wrong when we look back in November, hey, I mean, it is what it is. More information, change the opinion. But as we sit here in August, we stand on business. Let's go game by game here. Colorado State, that's a dub. At Michigan, second game of the year. Bring your hard hat and lunch pail. It's gonna be a physical one. Say what you want about who Michigan lost last year and who's not back and no more Jim Harbaugh. It's going to be the same old Michigan. Like, it's going to be the exact same formula. I think this is a dogfight. I think the trenches of Texas get tested, but I think the firepower of Texas and the poise of Quinn Ewers is too much for Michigan on that day. I think they pull away and they win that football game. Think about this, though. The confidence builder that a win against the defending national champions in week 2 would be. We looked at that game against Alabama in week 2 for Texas, and it ultimately, I believe, was like the rocket fuel for them on their season. Like, that was the moment where, and we were on the field after the game, like watching Texas celebrate with their fans and with each other as a team, and like you could tell there was so much like, okay, not that we're back, not that we've arrived, all that, but like okay, we can do this. Like, it's one thing to be so close the year before when they came to you in Austin, when Alabama did with Bryce Young and co., and he just put on Superman's cape. I think it's a similar vibe when they go to Michigan and win that game. So they beat Michigan. They're 2-0. You beat UTSA. You beat the Warhawks of ULM. You got your first SEC game against Mississippi State. You win that game. You get a bye now before Red River with Oklahoma. I think having the bye the week before makes the difference. I also just think when you look at Oklahoma, like, this is a game, and should's a funny word to use. This is a game Texas should win. Oklahoma's breaking in a new QB, new offensive line. The defense for Oklahoma is going to be really freaking good, but I think that Texas, from a talent level, and again, going back to Quinn Ewers, from a poise level, will be good enough to win that football game. I think it'll be a tough one. I think it's going to be emotionally and physically draining, but I do think they win that football game. And then as the SEC, you know, the gauntlet that it is, man, you turn right around, no rest, you go play Georgia. Now you get Georgia at home, which is nice, but you get Georgia. And I just think that turning around after the Oklahoma game, with the way that that'll be so draining, as I just mentioned, I think they actually end up losing that game to Georgia. No shade, Georgia's probably the best team in America. I think you'd lose that game. You beat Vandy, at Vandy now, go to Nashville, but I think you win that game. You play Florida. That's going to be a scrappy one. They'll be back and forth, I believe. I think Florida will show up for that one, but I do think you win that football game as well. You go to Arkansas. Now, Arkansas, a little bit of rivalry juice. Taylon Green's a very talented quarterback for them. We'll see where things are at out there in Fayetteville at that part of the year, but I do think you win that football game. Now, Kentucky. This is a tricky one. I think you lose to Kentucky. And the reason why is I think they're going to be a very physical outfit. I think Brock Vandagriff and that receiving core out there with Dane Key and Barry and Brown, like, they have some real explosivity. They're going to be able to push you. That paired with the fact that you go to A&M the next week, I think Texas is mature, but I do think there's a look-ahead spot here, and I think Kentucky actually gets the best of you. Now, the good news is if you're a Texas fan, I think that loss kind of snaps you back a little bit. I think it kind of creates some clarity for your football team. You go to A&M, win that game. It's personal. The rivalry's back. Like, I mean, everyone's, I'm sure, talking trash the week up. I mean, it's going to be essentially, if you're 9-2 heading into that game, that's for a playoff spot. Texas beats A&M in College Station, and the vibes are high as Texas is going to the college football playoff. I think they missed the SEC title game. My question would be for you, if you're a Texas fan, would you rather be 11-1, set to go run it back with Georgia, and, I mean, let's face it, like, you play another game against a really good roster, and maybe, you know, it's a little bit of a physical demand on your team, it's another emotional draining game, or would you rather have all that time now to rest, reset, get ready for a first-round playoff game that could potentially be in Austin if you're 10-2? I'm just saying. I think that either way you're in good shape there. But, again, I think they're 10-2. I think they make the playoff. And this kind of a record, this kind of a game, I guess the game against A&M, but this kind of a season, first year in the SEC, this should validate everything that Steve Sarkisian and that team did last season. What Steve Sarkisian has built at that point, I don't think should be or can be questioned if they do that their first year in the conference. So we got Texas at 10-2 with their ticket punch to the college football playoff. Now, one more record prediction for you, and also these are all going to be on our social platforms. So both on my Instagram at Jody Pickell and on the On3 TikTok. You just type in On3 on TikTok, and I think you find it. I think it's just at On3, but you can go and get like the 60-second version of these as well. But LSU, their over/under win total is set to 9.5. What is LSU's record going to be when the dust settles on the 2024 season? The question we're all asking, the formula we're all looking at here is, what is the trade-off now between the offense resetting and the defense, you have to believe, inevitably progressing now with Blake Baker now running the show? Offense scored 43 points a game last year. was good enough, I believe, to win the national championship if you had a defense to go with it. But you lose your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Jane Daniels. You lose two first-round wide receivers. What do you make of that? And going back to the defense, they let up 30 points a game last year. Like, I would be shocked to my core if LSU, after changing defensive staffs, stays that bad. Like, I have a hard time believing it. I don't have a ton of logic to back it up besides the fact that I think that Harold Perkins and Blake Baker are going to be dynamite. I don't believe it's going to happen. So take of that as you will. The safe bet to make here, I think, is year 3 Brian Kelly. I'm not talking about the win total. I'm talking about just overall. If you're trying to predict what LSU is going to be in 2024, look to year 3 Brian Kelly. And I've said this many times, but for those of y'all that are just now kind of getting up to speed as we jump into college football season, Brian Kelly told us when we talked to him on this show during the offseason, he said, yeah, year 3 for me, usually pretty good. You check what he's saying, check the facts, if you will. Year 3, when he was at Cincinnati, made a BCS Bowl. Year 3 at Notre Dame, made the national title game. Year 3 at LSU, we'll see. But this is a team now that, regardless of what you think about Garrett Nussmeier, who's now the quarterback there, who we believe in a whole heck of a lot, regardless of what you think about the defense and how the personnel may or may not be where you would like it to be, this is a team, especially when you come play at their place any Saturday, they can beat you. Okay, it may not make sense on paper. It may not make sense when you break down the spread. LSU, I think, will be very, very much so a force in every single game they play with. So let's go game by game here. They get USC with the eyes of the country upon them. The best movie since The Hangover in Vegas. You got USC, and I'll just say this. Brian Kelly, say what you want about USC's offense and the defense and the matchup and all that. Brian Kelly's not losing another big opener. We'll leave it at that. Defense plays with an edge, and they beat USC. You beat Nichols the next week. You go to South Carolina. First SEC game, you beat them. You got UCLA in Baton Rouge, no less. You beat them. You beat South Alabama. Then you have Ole Miss coming to town. Now, if this isn't a night game, I don't know what we're supposed to do if we're LSU. Like, if we don't get Ole Miss at the crib at night after what happened last year, we got real problems. I feel too uncertain about LSU's defense to pick them in this game as we sit here in August. I think the Ole Miss defense has improved, just personnel-wise. I worry about the defense when they have to line it up against Jackson Dart and that whole outfit. Now, again, Death Valley at night, who knows? But I do think that they actually dropped that game against Ole Miss. Go to Arkansas, you win that game. You go to A&M. Now, if this was played in Death Valley, I think I'd pick LSU. However, with it being at A&M, I think that there's going to be some game, whether it's A&M or whether it's somewhere else on the schedule, where the newness of what they have on offense at some point in time shows itself a little bit. Again, I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be great, but I do think you actually drop that game at A&M. Alabama the next week, LSU's trying to bounce back, get their mind right. I think that Death Valley at night, LSU will beat Kalen DeBoer's Alabama team. I do. I think that will be a massive flag-planting win, another marketable moment to keep the recruiting momentum for LSU, which they've been crushing it on lately, by the way. That whole Brian Kelly can't recruit narrative pretty much in a coffin somewhere right now. So you win that game. Now, I think there's a letdown spot there where you go to Florida the next week. Again, it's in Gainesville. With that being the case, it's a major variable you have to account for here. Teams go to the swamp and just don't look like themselves. I think there's a letdown spot after Alabama with a tough atmosphere. I think you lose that game, but you finish with the win over Vandy. Swing game of sorts, I guess you could say, for the last game against Oklahoma, but I think you beat them as well. So you finish with a record of 9-3. The caveat I'll say here, I think 10-2 is extremely attainable. I had to kind of bring myself back down to earth a little bit because of what the defense was last year. Quite frankly, when making these predictions, I was super close to having them 10-2. 10-2 gets you in the playoff. I have you at 9-3 right now in August, but do not be surprised in the slightest if LSU doesn't show any newness offensively. If they don't show any like acclimation period there for their offense, and they go out and win 10 football games. So we'll stand on 9-3, could see 10-2, but that's what we have LSU at during the 2024 season is that final record of 9 wins and 3 losses. But again, let me know what y'all think when it comes to the Tigers, man. I wanted to make them 10-2, man. I did, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't pull the trigger. And sometimes that's okay. And we appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. This time next week, it's game week. Don't listen to what they tell you about week 0 not mattering and week 0 is not really the college football season start. When they are playing football on Saturday, college football has started, right? You honor week 0, we honor week 0. It's going to be a beautiful thing. We're talking a little week 1 tomorrow as well. Give you some thoughts for us when it comes to this whole Florida-Miami dance we got week 1, which will be a blast. We appreciate y'all being locked in. We appreciate y'all making this show what it is. Again, if you have not yet, subscribe to this show. Subscribe to this channel right now. Also, make sure you're subscribed on the podcast feed. We appreciate you so much in advance for that. Nick Brake on the ones and twos, making this whole thing happen, producing the show. For Nick Brake, myself, JD Piquel, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.